Today we're going to install a Wingman kit on a Husky 501. We're going to begin by removing the seat. Next we're going to remove the tank. Start out by undoing the breather. Unclip the fuel pump. 8mm bolt here. 8mm bolt on the shroud. Shroud here. And disconnect your fuel pressure line. Not only are we swapping out the ECU, but we're going to be swapping out to a Raze Motorsports harness as well. And we're going to begin by disconnecting the battery here and there. Once you get the battery disconnected, we're going to remove this side panel. Then you can come over to the other side of the bike, remove the 8mm bolt down here, remove this panel as well. When removing the harness, we're going to start at the front of the bike and work right back. So we're going to remove this headlight, disconnect the two connections back here for the start and kill switch. On this particular bike, most of these wires you see is aftermarket for this Voyager Trail Tech controller. So we're just going to disconnect the start button, the headlight, and we're also going to disconnect these Voyager connectors just to get out of the way. The stop button connects down here by the regulator, but go ahead and disconnect these and move on to the next step. There's a ton of aftermarket wiring on this bike for this customer, so don't be afraid if you're not seeing all these wires on your machine. Most of this stuff is for that Voyager box. We'll go ahead and release this here and pull the wires towards the rear of the bike. These are the wires that you wanted to bring towards the rear of the bike. We're then going to move on to the coolant temperature and the coolant temp sensor in the head. Disconnect this wire, string it through. Moving over to this side of the bike, we're going to unplug the intake air temp sensor, the TPS, the map sensor, and the fuel injector. Go ahead and get those 4 wires unplugged and loose. Once you have those unplugged, you can disconnect this from the frame, set it aside. Now these ones are free. Moving over to here, you're going to unplug your voltage regulator and your kill button wires that goes to your coil. Then you're going to remove this ground bolt, and while we're down here, this white connector back here goes to your fan. Unplug that as well. Then you're going to disconnect this white connector here, come over to this blue one, and unplug this. Before you can pull the harness through, you gotta come over to this side of the bike and unplug this guy. Don't forget, on the top of the throttle body where the fuel injector plugs in, take a pick and unplug the fuel injector wire. You can now pull these wires up through the frame. We're going to move on to the next step. Remove this rubber shroud from the ECU. Coming over to the other side of the bike, you're going to cut the zip tie here and pull the wires that went up to the front of the bike back through, flip it onto the back of the machine. So now you got all the wires from the front of the machine draped over the back. Get the rubber protector off the ECU. You're going to unplug the ECU connector. Then we're going to pull this off the plastic, pull this cable down through from the top, and pull this off. Once you get this pulled out of its rubber, this whole tray will pop up and come loose. Everything is disconnected except for these two connectors that are sitting on rubber tabs as well. So we're going to pull those off the tabs, and then the harness will come out. Now that you've pulled these two connectors off of their rubbers up underneath on the inner fender, last thing we got to do is unplug the starter solenoid, and the harness will come out. Once you got the starter solenoid unplugged, grab the tray, pull it up through. Should look just like this. Now we're going to grab our new one, start reinstalling. Go ahead and grab your Raze harness. We're going to go ahead and start assembling it back on the bike. Looking from the back of the bike, we're going to start on the left side, and you're going to set the tray just kind of rough in its place and get your wires separated, ones that are going to on the right side of the bike and these ones over here going on the left. You're going to take this group of wires just like when we removed it, and you're going to route it through here and start to get it laid up. We're then going to go over to the other side, and we're going to take these wires and we're going to begin by running them up to the handlebars. Jumping back over to the right side of the bike, these are the wires that got to go up to the handlebars, just like they were. Route them through the frame, up along factory area, and get them back up into the handlebar area so we can plug in the start, kill switch, headlight, etc. Now that we got the wires back up to the front, we're going to go ahead and connect all these connectors back up to the original places. You're then going to reinstall your headlight if we're working on a 500 and get that mounted back up into place. Now that the headlight is all back assembled, you can go ahead and take your tray and get this snapped into place. You've got all your wires run through the frame here. Now we're ready to start plugging this stuff back in one by one. We're going to start out with reattaching your ground wire and connecting your bullet connectors up here. Now that you get your bullet connectors, ground wire hooked up, you're going to clip together your chargeback connector. Then you're going to plug in your voltage regulator. This goes over to your coolant temperature sensor, so you're going to route it through to the other side and then connect that to the coolant temp sensor in the head right here. Then you're going to grab your throttle position sensor wire, hook it up to your TPS, make sure it clips and locks, then slide the rubber boot up into place. The round one is your intake air temp sensor. Depending on what intake you have, find where your sensor's at, plug that one in next. Make sure you hear a click and it locks, put the rubber boot, protect it. Then you're going to grab your map sensor plug. Map sensor's right here on the throttle body. Same thing, push it on to hear a click, put the rubber boot on it. This 4-pin goes up to your voltage regulator. Go ahead and connect these two together here. Last plug we've got over here, this is your fuel injector wire, and the fuel injector is on the top of the throttle body on the 500, right here. Go ahead and take that, connect it to your fuel injector. Alright, moving back. We're going to connect the fan wire. That's going to lay here. This one goes on top of it like this. We're going to put a zip tie just where the factory had it right here. Go ahead and grab these two relays and your starter solenoid connector and walk it down through here like this. These relays get hung up over in here, so you can hang those back up on the rubber grommets. Your starter solenoid, you can get pushed back up into place right here, and go ahead and grab your starter solenoid wire and plug that in. This is your KTM diagnostic port wire. This actually clips in right here. You can get that fastened in. This other one hangs down in here. Coming over on this side of the bike, you're going to put a zip tie where these wires are routed and laying in this tray. Put a zip tie just like the factory had it right through here. Once you get your zip tie in, you're going to go ahead and connect to your rear tail light if you have one. We're now ready to plug the ECU in. Go ahead and plug it into the factory harness and set it in the tray. You're now okay to grab your battery, set it in the tray. If you're on a KTM, put the plastic holder and bolt through. If you're on a Husky, use this rubber and get it in place. Put the positive and negative back on the battery. You're then going to grab your harness for your map switch, plug it into the bullet connectors, follow along the factory harness, plug it into the ECU. Map switch wire is going to come up through the back. You're going to plug it into the EXP labeled pigtail on the back of the Raze ECU. Now the ECU is in, all the wires are routed in the right place. We're ready to install the fuel tank. So go ahead and grab the fuel tank, set it in position. Before putting the fuel tank on, these 501s and 500s are very tight. You need to make sure that everything is tight up against here. You get a big open area for the fuel tank to slide down and lock onto its pin here. Go over to the other side, show what that looks like. Same thing, nice and clear. Everything's tight up against underneath the frame, just like it was from factory. Once you are at this point, the wires are all close and zip tied up. Now we're going to set the fuel tank on the bike. The fuel tank sitting in place, bottomed out nice and easily. Go ahead and plug your fuel pump in, 8mm bolt, fuel line, and your shroud bolts that come in from the front. Go ahead and snap your left and right side covers back into place. Grab your seat, install your seat. Now that you get your seat installed, go ahead and give it a test fire. You're good to go. Wingman is installed.